And Dave Sussman back with you at Whiskey Politics. You can find us on America's Voice News. If you haven't subscribed to us yet on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. You can also find us on all of your favorite podcast applications, including the Ricochet Audio Network, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. I'm delighted today, actually, to have a guy that I still, Tony, to this day, get people telling me that one of their favorite episodes was you, Kurt Schlichter, and Evan Sayed and myself at CPAC cracking wise last year. How you doing, my friend?
Are you going back? Are you going back to CPAC?
We're going to be there. We're going to have a booth. We're going to be broadcasting live from there. Yourself?
I'm going to be there. I'm going to be smoking cigars, and I will probably be drunk.
Well, we might be joining you. That sounds like a fantastic, horrible evening. I don't know why I would want to join you for that, but you, in fact, first of all, WIBC Radio in Indianapolis, and I think you may have some announcements on that as well. Maybe a little news on what's going on with your radio show. But you also have a great podcast as well. Speaking about drinking and smoking, what's the name of your podcast?
So we do the Eat, Drink, Smoke podcast out here in Indianapolis. A review of bourbon, a review of cigars right here, and then a little bit of talk. I do a fair amount of culture on air, both on my morning show and then on my syndicated midday show. But there's more to sometimes get into and different ways to do it. And I like the culture stuff because I find that the culture does lead to the politics. Politics is downstream of culture. That Breitbart was correct. So I think that it's important that some of us at least continue that down, and there's ways to reach people and grab people. So and I like to have a good time with a cigar and a beverage. I'm not a big drinker. I'm more of a sipper than anything else, unless I'm at CPAC, in which case you want to forget the
no, that's exactly what it is. And you're with Fingers, right? Fingers Malloy?
Fingers Malloy, the one and only former Washington Times contributor. And, of course, he's a radio host and podcaster in his own right. And then April D. Gregory, who you Ricochet people more than definitely know. We're all indie-based, so we're like, let's get together and do the thing. So it's been going great. It's growing. World domination, one bit of talking into a microphone at a time.
Yeah.
I can't hit a three-point shot. I can't throw the touchdown pass, and I can't sing. I had very few options.
As Jewish guys, we're very limited in that athletic ability. What do they say?
Wow. Wow. You're the Rashida Tlaib of podcasting.
Yeah, no, either that or managing the team. Let's talk about this because this is actually a great segue for us to first discuss what's going on in the state of media right now. We're seeing a lot of radio syndication. We're seeing a lot of folks going away right now. Terrestrial radio, podcasting. What's your view of what we're looking at right now as kind of a macro perspective of things?
Well, so no, I mean it's the question that we ask, right, and that we should ask. So if you look at radio, what is old is new again. It still matters. It's still important. It's still there. It's still in your car. It's still something that people are attracted to, especially on that local side, because what's going on in your neighborhood, what's going on in your society matters. You can get the national story anywhere, really, but radio gives you a local flavor and a local touch, a local connection that very few things can. Part of the issue is that the markets don't see radio as necessarily attractive. And you see radio stocks have issues. You see radio advertising that's down. For example, and I mean, not to be too inside baseball here, but car dealers. Car dealers, when they advertise, used to advertise on radio a lot, used to advertise on television a lot. Well, now if I can go to Car Gurus or Cars.com or something like that, I'm going right there to advertise because, well, that's where the people are to buy things. So that all has pressures on radio. Then you have, of course, what's going on with podcasting. You have how that has taken over and how people engage their listening differently. And radio is not podcast. Man, they are completely different in their format, in their formatics, in their presentation style. And people who take their radio show and say, oh, don't forget to listen to my podcast, it's a radio show. That's not it, guys. That is not it. And you're someone who does this. It's a different feel and flavor and taste. And there's a naturalness to a podcast that doesn't jive for radio. Radio needs the form and the structure of it. So people are getting more and more used to that podcast world. I think the biggest problem with podcasting is where is that level of monetization? You know, if you take the top guys out of it, you know, you take Rogan, Carolla out of the equation, right? And some of the others, Pod Save America or whatever the case may be, where are the monetization options? And that's why one of the things that I'm following very closely, what are Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson going to do now that they're leaving Patreon? That story, that is an unbelievable, earth-shattering story.
So what happened with that? What was that? Archon of Sargon, whatever his name is, Carl Benjamin?
Sargon of Akkad. His name is Carl Benjamin. I never heard of the dude a day in my life. He's not on Patreon, right? So Patreon's a place where you place your content and the people can donate to it, right? And contribute to the content they like. By the way, contribute to Whiskey Politics. It's very important. Very important. Thousands of dollars should go. The man needs one more button for his shirt. If he had just one more button, everything would be great right there. That's handsome. Well, you know,
I'm trying to bring Love Boat back, baby. Come on.
Oh, are you? You are the Captain Stubing of our time. So this guy, Carl Benjamin, he's not even on Patreon. He's on YouTube, but he's not on his channel. He's on somebody else's channel answering a question about how much he dislikes the alt-right. And in answering the question, he used the N-word. Patreon kicked him off Patreon because of what he said on somebody else's YouTube channel. And what Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin said was, yeah, okay, this is more than we can take. And Rubin is interesting because he's claiming that 60 to 70% of his income comes from Patreon.
Yeah, he's got 4,000 patrons on there, people that give him a monthly fee, anywhere from a couple of bucks upwards. And he's moving over, and it's definitely a huge cultural shift in that whole monetization idea as well, because we're talking about free speech ultimately, aren't we?
Well, yeah, well, definitely we are, and it's multifold, right? It's the people who are paying for the content they like and they appreciate that they can't get anywhere else, right? And then it's the idea of these platforms deciding that they have somehow this morality that the rest of us don't have, and that the market can't suss out who they should and shouldn't be listening to, that they have to somehow be proactive or hyper reactive to something that happens, even though it's not in their world. And that's the problem. So I love that they're making this move. If they look to start something else, I'm very interested in that. And it might just be that we all have our places, and the donation part comes direct. And I've always been very kind of sketchy on donations because I'm almost, I feel weird about the ask. I guess is the right way to say it. But in the end result, I want to support the content that speaks to me. So I think people want to feel like they're supporting the things that they like and the people that they like and love and the content that they adore. And so I think it's worthwhile, and that's why you should donate to Whiskey
Well, we haven't even got a platform up for that yet because, like you, we haven't gone to, I don't think we've found a home yet. Not Whiskey Politics. I'm talking about podcasting, YouTuber channels that are not at that level of Carolla and Rogan as you're talking about. And the question is, it comes down to, I think we're kind of like, the sausage is still being made, so to speak, and we haven't all figured out what the final product's going to look like. The free speech ideas, you know, a lot of new platforms are up and coming, and we're trying to figure it all out. We're trying to, as you said, suss it out yet. And the question is, where does this all end up? And, you know, are we all going to end up as one gigantic Daily Wire, Blaze, CRTV type thing, or is it all going to be more individual?
Well, the problem is that if you're talking about the world of let's just give it the big brush, the broad brush of conservatives, you can't get conservatives to agree about anything. You can't get 4 conservatives to agree about where to have lunch. So I don't know how you're going to get them to agree on one specific platform. I know that for me, YouTube is not it, even though I do play some things there. If you demonetize Dennis Prager, I don't know. I'm sorry. We can't be friends. I don't know what to do. It's Dennis Prager, who is the single most unique guy in all of radio. No one does what Dennis does. You demonetize him. That it's a ridiculous notion. It only goes to show how little they're actually listening to the content as opposed to painting. They don't.
They've already decided who you are and who deserves a platform and who doesn't. And speaking of monetization, we're going to take a quick break here for AVN. We'll be right back here with Tony Katz, WIBC Radio, here at Whiskey Politics with Dave Sussman. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman here with Tony Katz over in Indianapolis. And by the way, congratulations on your Colts, my friend.
Ah, thank you. I trained them myself. Yeah, beating the Texans was a very, very good deal, and I feel good going. Depending on when you see this, we will have Kansas City next. In Kansas City.
They're not too successful in playoff football, so I think you guys are in a good place.
No, and the Colts own them 4-0 in the last games that they've had, and no Kareem Hunt. They lost 3 of their last 6. They're not the same team, but Patrick Mahomes, that man can throw. I'm hoping.
Well, good luck to you, and I think they're all going to end up facing the Chargers in the AFC anyway, so we'll see what happens there. But anyway, continuing on our discussion about this changing shift in the sands of media right now. You've got a very successful radio show. You've worked your way up. As long as I've heard about you and known you, and we've got a lot of mutual acquaintances and friends, you're one of the hardest working guys. You've got 2 shows, correct? Morning and afternoon?
Yeah. So I do 6 hours a day.
Hours a day. So, I mean, that's one of the hardest working guys in all of radio, and you really do have your thumb on the pulse of what's going on right now in terrestrial radio as well. But, when we talk about what's happening in media, we can't ignore social media. And this, we just refer to free speech, for example, and the squelching of free speech, especially of conservative free speech, we're seeing on Twitter, we're seeing on Facebook, other platforms as well. This is all seeming to be related now on what is going on with this hypersensitive small group of individuals on Twitter that somehow get filtered up into the mainstream outrage media. What are your opinions of what's going on right now with all of this?
I don't know what opinion you're supposed to have. I don't know what to do. It's a societal issue. What do you do about a society that not only is upset but wants to be upset? They thrive on being upset. Some people talk about it as virtue signaling, right? They're not really upset. They're just virtue signaling so they can show all their friends how much they care. I refer to it as reputation capital. I look at it as what they're doing is they're putting something out there so they can bank it. So when they need it later for some other cause or need or begging or forgiveness, they've got this capital to spend. When you take a look at the New York Times and the rest of, I should really say the whole of network media, during the presidential election 2016, and their willingness to say, we are going to not worry about journalistic integrity. That's how much we hate Donald Trump and we don't want him to win. And then when the election came and went, they said, all right, now we're back. They really believed that they had not spent all their reputation capital when you and I both know, and everybody else who's paying attention honestly knows that they have. And one of the reasons that we have accepted the very concept of fake news is that we saw it happen with our own eyes, and this network media apparatchik, they refuse to admit their complicity in that, right? So we won't let them off the hook. They refuse to admit it. So therefore, there is no moving forward and moving ahead here. But people do profit in a sense in being aggrieved. How do you stop that? That's a real tough question. And I think part of it is you can't stop it until people get shame again. Until you can realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Hey, maybe when it's a conversation about with Steve Scalise, the congressman from Louisiana, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congressman from New York, maybe when her supporters wish that James Hodgkinson had been a better shot and murdered Steve Scalise on that baseball diamond, maybe she should say, hey, guys, we don't do that here. That's just not who we are. But there's no shame. It just gets let go. And maybe those people are like, hey, maybe I shouldn't wish death on somebody. But that doesn't happen either. So I think shame is part of the problem. There is
on Ocasio-Cortez, real quick, a quick side note on this. Mark Tapson wrote an interesting article over at Front Page Mag, and he says that if we underestimate Ocasio-Cortez, we do so at our own peril. That she may not be politically smart. Maybe she's politically smart, but she isn't policy-wise smart. Maybe not academic smart, but she is nailing this thing, right? I mean, we're looking at elevated office very, very quickly for her if something doesn't happen out of the blue that derails her, right?
So I would argue that was correct right until, and Mark's right. Mark's a bright dude, and people should read him. Right until she did the 60 Minutes interview. I often talk about the fact that the progressive left always overplays their hand. Eventually, they're going to do something. One of them is going to do something that goes just too far. The Brett Kavanaugh hearings, Mazie Hirono overplaying her hand, the senator from Hawaii, saying that men should just shut up and do the right thing for a change. Those kinds of things. How they went after Kavanaugh, how they decided that one woman's statement without any verification is therefore gospel, overplaying their hand. And Cortez going on 60 Minutes, the interview from Anderson Cooper, where she said that people pay too much attention to the facts and really should focus on the morality of the argument. That hit everybody the wrong way. You've got Washington Post, Glenn Kessler, fact checker, saying, listen, we fact checked you twice. We have fact checked Donald Trump 7,645 times. You've got Chris Cillizza talking about how she's really out of her mind here on these subjects. She overplayed her hand. Now, she's been very good at keeping things at bay and turning things around.
Yeah.
The jiu-jitsu from her has been, or the judo has been just terrific. This one's going to hurt. So I don't know if she has got this veil of impenetrability. Whoopi Goldberg on The View told her to stop crapping on other people, shut her mouth, and learn something.
Yeah,
for a few weeks.
She referred to
that
the pioneers of the Democratic Party, the John Lewises and the folks, and sit down and listen.
Right.
Which is wise words, I think. But she's a celebrity, though, and celebrity trumps everything today, doesn't it?
She is Trump. I mean, she's Trump. How she handles things on social media, how she by the way, Trump and how he's governed is something that I'm okay with. Trump and how he talks, not necessarily. But Trump is one of those guys with no shame. That is exactly the thing that allows him to walk through walls. Ocasio-Cortez is the same way. She has no shame. Call me a socialist. Call me a radical. Do whatever. And
I want to get back into some of the politics after the next break here in a couple of minutes. But before we get to that, getting back to the initial subject of this segment, and that's social media. And one of the questions that I had for you, and especially from a perspective of, Midwesterner, you've got a lot of listeners who have traditional values. When they see things like the Women's March, and they see things like Linda Sarsour, and who, is basically out there supporting Farrakhan, who's an anti-Semite, and do people understand? Are people learning who's behind these movements, or is it just support women and everybody else, shut up?
No, well, first, and I appreciate the way you asked the question, because we should never make the assumption that Middle America doesn't understand. It's an assumption that's made by people named Pelosi and Schumer, and it is not in any way fact. I live in the Indianapolis suburbs, and Indianapolis is represented by Andre Carson, and Congressman Andre Carson has agreed to attend conferences and sit on panels with unindicted co-conspirators who are fundraisers for Al-Qaeda and those kinds of groups. He is somebody who admits his support of Louis Farrakhan, won't condemn Louis Farrakhan. I have been talking about this so often here that I finally gotten other media to ask questions about it. He still won't condemn Louis Farrakhan, and there are people here who will still support Andre Carson. But even the rabbis here in Indianapolis, and there are some progressive rabbis here, some female rabbis here, they have come out and written op-eds saying they will no longer support the Women's March because of the anti-Semitism. It may have taken them a while, but I'm just very appreciative they got to the place. I couldn't be more,
and these are reform rabbis
of
that
them.
are doing this?
So the answer is
That's good to
reform
hear.
Progressive rabbis, yes.
Yeah.
Reconstructionist rabbis, yes. And it's extremely important. And so while there may be other things we disagree about, I will celebrate this. And it does have this huge level of impact when people realize, oh, maybe there is something here. Oh, maybe there is a problem here. We should discuss it. But there's no doubt that at least for Indianapolis,
Good.
I lead that charge, that conversation about these things. But it does connect, and people do realize, and they do speak out. And the Midwest is no different than California or New York in that regard.
Great.
It's just
and
a
on
lot
the other
easier
side
to
of the
afford a
break
house.
here, I'd love to get your opinion on what's going on politically right now with the immigration debate, and also what's shaping up for 2020 with the presidential campaign. So we'll be right back with Tony Katz here at Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman. We'll see you on the other side. And Dave Sussman back with you at Whiskey Politics, and I'm delighted to have with us our good friend Tony Katz. You're also a contributor at Ricochet, right? You occasionally chime.
I am. I don't do enough, and then John Gabriel sends me nasty emojis, and it's awkward. The whole thing is very, very awkward. But yes, I am a contributor at Ricochet.
Yeah. Well,
proudly.
it's always good when you put a piece up there. I know a lot of people really do appreciate it. So speaking of Ricochet, there's a lot of debate happening right now regarding the politics of the moment, and that's the government shutdown, and also with what's happening with Donald Trump and the wall. And you know, up until about 2 weeks ago, I think a lot of people, especially on the right, were really deeply nervous that Trump was going to capitulate and give in to Schumer and Pelosi and just walk away from the wall. I think some people got in his ear and said, hey, look, no new taxes, Bush, blah, blah, blah. You're not going to win in 2020. You better stick to this thing. What do you see from your perspective as what is happening and what might happen with it?
Part of it has to do with exactly how long he can handle stories of members of the Coast Guard not getting paid, right? Jim Garrity, National Review, had a great piece out the other day showing all the people who aren't getting paid, how many here, how many there. And his point wasn't to say Trump has to give in. It was to say, just here's the human cost of the conversation that we're having. What I have found most interesting is that we have not yet, there was a headline on Drudge Report that they're still disagreeing on what negotiation means. We as a country haven't figured out what border security means. You can't get a common definition on what border security actually means. It's a wall, it's not a wall. It's drone, it's not a drone. It's a fence with slats. It's slats, but you can see through them, but not through all of them. Where it happens, how it happens. I do not know what it means to monitor the border if you're just looking, oh, look, there's 9 people crossing, and then you go back to playing Sudoku on your iPhone. I don't know what to do with that information. We haven't made a decision. And part of that is because in media, they have done a remarkable job of conflating legal and illegal immigration to say that people on the political right oppose immigration. This is untrue. This is the lie. It is an opposition to illegal immigration, which rational people should be opposed to, because that's about breaking the law, and we are a nation of laws, and nobody is above the law. So we can't even get that part of the conversation correct. So what does Trump do in this case? I like to turn that around. What do Schumer and Pelosi do in this case? If the whole objective is to decide who gets the blame, that's fine and sweet and wonderful and cute for CNN. But at the end, what does our border look like? What does protection actually mean? They scream about wanting border protection. We're in favor of border protection. But I can't tell you what that is because they can't define it. And I would keep pressing on them to define what border security means in the year 2019.
Why wouldn't it be what they originally defined it as in 2013 and 29 when Schumer and Clinton and Obama were standing up there, first of all, labeling people who break the law by breaking through the border as illegal immigrants, and secondly, talking about a wall and it isn't just a one-stop, quick fix. A wall is going to fix it all. No, you need drones, you need security, you need ICE and all the other things. But where is the discussion on the hypocrisy from the left that we see right now? Is there any?
Well, part of I think the issue is that CNN certainly won't show it, and MSNBC certainly won't show it. But there has been no concerted effort from the Republicans on the floor of the Senate or when they do go on TV to say, hey, Schumer was in favor of this. Why don't you ask him why he's all of a sudden not in favor of this? Why all of a sudden now, because it's President Trump, is it a problem? if you don't have the people who have the microphone, right? Our microphones are different than Marco Rubio's microphone, right? Saying directly to somebody, why doesn't Rand Paul take a video camera behind him, walk over to Chuck Schumer's office and say, hey, you were in favor of a border and of a wall X number of years ago. Why not now? Why don't you explain to my constituents why you are keeping the government shut down? Why not do that? Why not be that direct and focused? And part of the reason people do love Trump and can't stand the establishment is that they won't go nose to nose. They want to seem smart and they want to be nice. And do I look good in my suit? And is my tie straight? You got to take off the tie and you got to sometimes fight the fight. And you do that by asking very tough, specific questions and forcing them to answer to their hypocrisy. And I think that what you're bringing up about Schumer is incredibly important, but it will only really start making some headway and turning that tide if it doesn't come from you and me as commentators, is if it comes from other members of the U.S. Senate to ask that direct, pointed.
It's also about educating our populace, right? Because, I mean, you see, I think there was an article on Drudge this morning where Cabot Phillips over at Campus Reform was asking people to, college students in American University, to comment on Trump's quotes regarding illegal immigration and the wall. And he read them and everybody says, oh, it's racist, it's jingoistic, it's a nightmare, it's horrible. And he says, oh, wait a minute. Did you know that this was Chuck Schumer? Did you know this was Barack Obama? Oh, really? Oh, wow. It's about education, because if you turn on the media, as you were just talking about CNN and MSNBC, and I don't know why we refer to CNN now anyway, Tony. They're not even in the top 10 of cable news. I mean, they're, without airports, obviously, nobody's watching them. But anyway, the fact is well, the reality being here is that people are uneducated as to the issues, aren't they? And the media are carrying the narratives for the left. Many people say that Fox News is carrying it on the right. I don't see that. But the fact is that you've got to educate people on the truth now. How do we do that?
Well, I think that you're not wrong. And it's not even so much education about the truth. It's, oh my gosh, did you see this? Why is he now saying he's opposed to it when here he was for it? No, maybe somebody should ask him that question. And I think that, you know, I never liked the idea of saying, see, you don't know, but I'm going to tell you. I've never been that particular guy, and I think that way too many people are. But you do have to show people that there's much more to the story. And one of the things that I, for lack of a better word, preach on air, the story of this 7-year-old girl who was shot and killed in Houston is an absolutely awful story. Young black girl.
What happened with the 7-year-old girl?
What was that?
I saw the news report, but
so this 7-year-old girl was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in Houston. And Sean King, who is a race hustler on social media, said, my sources say a white man in a red truck in his 40s was driving away from the scene, and immediately made it racial. White man, black girl, white man, black girl. It turns out he actually got a tip and gave it to police that led to the arrest of the shooter. The shooter was black. People are still going out there saying
Sheila Jackson Lee wouldn't correct the record, if I remember correctly.
Moving. That is 100% correct. Wouldn't
Senator from Texas.
The record. So this
Congressman, sorry.
This Congressman from Texas. So this conversation is a part about exposing that, and that is a lot of how it works. And you know, we've come full circle in the conversation. The rise of podcasts have really made it a lot easier to access information and share information in that way, because people can engage them in a passive manner, and it's very important. But your point, going back to Schumer, is really the key to this, which is how do we make sure that we keep sharing information? How do we take our time to know a story? This whole conversation that I bring up about Sean King is about, and something I preach on air is, you got to give it a day. You got to give it 2 days, because the story never comes out in the first hours. Most people, they want to be first so they get the click on social media. I want to be right. So you got to give it a couple of days. And once you give it a couple of days, you realize the truth of a story. Our problem is that a news cycle moves so quick that we've already got on to 3 other stories before the truth of that story came out. And that's what they're banking on. So our job is much harder because a conversation about honesty takes a little more time to build and create.
Talk about creating that honesty in that story. We've got a lot of news coming up in the next couple of years with the next election. There's always a next election. And I want to talk about this after our last break here with Tony Katz, and we'll be right back at Whiskey Politics. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. We got Tony Katz. And Tony, folks can find you where, by the way? I know you got a Twitter account and you're on social media.
You can find me on Twitter at Tony Katz, Facebook, Tony Katz Radio, at TonyKatz.com. You get the podcasts and everything else there. It's probably enough. I mean, I am on Instagram, Tony Katz, as well. You can find me on Tinder. Save that for later. So I mean, it's a little bit of everywhere, but a lot of work on Facebook these days. I just won't advertise there. I'm not giving Mark Zuckerberg a dime. I'm just utilizing what he's got and moving on.
You know, real quickly on Facebook, we try to advertise Whiskey Politics. We try to sponsor one of our posts, and they wouldn't approve it because it's quote unquote political.
Really?
Okay, fine. Don't take our money.
Okay,
that's all right. I was in 2 minds whether I wanted to do it anyway, but I was just stunned.
Wow,
I was stunned.
I did not have that problem, but mine was Tony Katz, right? So it wasn't Whiskey Politics in the name, but it was very often political and dating advice. So maybe that I kind of evened it out just a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to need to get some of that from you.
I can help. I can help. I am a guru.
Speaking of dating advice, we're moving towards the Democrats are going to be choosing a new suitor for the 2020 election. I know it's barely 2019, but, these things are just a continual, perpetual cycle, much of it media created. But we got Elizabeth Warren. She's thrown her smoke ring in. You've got Joe Biden flirting right now.
Her smoke ring in. Nicely done.
It was weak. It was weak. I know.
Just a little.
I'll be here all week, folks.
A little something for the man. Anybody? No.
Thank you.
No one.
Tuppence
Just
hate
me. Okay.
But what the rumors are saying that there's 30 to 40 people that are going to be stepping up in Iowa. Talk to me about what your impressions are and where things are right now for Trump and what we're looking at for the Democrats.
Well, I would like to take this time to announce my exploratory committee for President of the United States 2020. As a Democrat, I figure before anybody notices, I should be able to pull in a good $50,000-$60,000, and then off to Iowa and one good night of steak at 801 Chop House, best steakhouse in America. It really truly is. You'll
get votes, by the way.
What was that?
You would get votes.
Oh, I would totally
absolutely
get votes.
Yeah, they hear you guys in Iowa, right? They can get your broadcast.
Well, they get the stream in Iowa. That we're not on in Iowa yet, but soon. I think it's great news for me. I think it's great news for anybody who's in our business. You're going to have 30 to 40 people all clamoring for airtime. It is going to be like the craziest Saturday Night Live audition ever. And we're going to watch these people abuse each other in a way that we can't even begin to fathom. What they're going to be willing to do to each other to be able to rise up, to be able to gain a news cycle, half a news cycle, 3 hours of a news cycle, get a little bit here, do this to the other person there. Oh, this person's got a little bit of heat. Okay, we need the Oppo research on him. We think that what the Republicans went through was crazy. This is how much popcorn do you have to eat? Because they're doing 12 debates. 12. That is a dozen for those of us playing the home game. And that is nothing but world-class content for a guy like myself.
So when you have that, in California, you have something called the jungle primary, right? Where only the top 2 go through. But, 20, 30 people can come and go through it. What does that do as far as diluting people's vote and creating front runners where none existed before? I mean, doesn't that change the science of it in primaries? Maybe,
but there's also a question of who does the media apparatchik choose to cover. Right. For example, there was a Democrat from Maryland whose name eludes me right now. And that's the whole point. He was the first person to announce, I think, a former congressman. Nobody is talking about him. No one mentions his name. They claim the first person was Elizabeth Warren. It wasn't Elizabeth Warren. So there'll be some people they don't talk about, they don't get into the conversation about, that don't get invited to have the interviews as often as Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or Joe Biden, right? Or Beto O'Rourke. So they'll do their own winnowing out. They'll do their own kind of shaping of conversations. And it's going to take someone having some kind of wild moment in a debate in order to make the change. And then maybe they'll change the debate rules to say you have to have X percentage to be in the debate. So instead of, 3 tiers of debates, it's only like 4.5 people for all I know. These are the people as superdelegates. They'll find a way to screw others.
Those superdelegates are changing this year, though, aren't they? I mean, you've got a lot of the institutional Democrats that are balking at having superdelegates this year. I think they've changed the rules because a lot of people were really angry about what happened with Clinton and Bernie.
Yeah, but if you think that I'm going to somehow believe that when the time comes, they're not going to make the moves they think are necessary. They stole an election from Bernie Sanders. I would not have wanted Bernie Sanders as president. I don't want his policies anywhere near me. But I recognize that they stole an election from the man, and I don't think that's right. They stole it. Of course they did. Of course Hillary did. Of course Donna Brazile did. Of course the entire team did. Of course the media apparatus
Debbie
did.
Wasserman Schultz.
Stole it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So why would I not think they won't work a Chicago way kind of deal again?
So taking a look at the field, you're going to have folks like Biden, who's now considered a moderate Democrat, an old school Democrat. But, he's going to be 109 by the time he gets to become president if he's inaugurated in 2020.
Right.
So, you've got some tiered folks at the top, whether it's, Kamala Harris now. We're talking, she's hitting the identity boxes. But when you start going down and taking a look at what's from a broader perspective of what's happening with the Democrats and the leftism and the progressive nature of the Democrats and pushing to the left, pushing to the left, what does that mean for, well, I guess the question first is, are there any traditional Democrats left, classic liberals?
No. The only one who they'll say comes close, he comes out of Indiana, Pete Buttigieg, who is the mayor of South Bend. Who's been getting a lot of juice lately, and you'll see him in Iowa. But he's playing for a cabinet position. He is not left enough to be able to be nominated by this party. But in the question of are there any Democrats left? No, Democrats are over. The Democratic Party is dead. I often say the days of Daniel Patrick Moynihan are over.
What was his?
Pete Buttigieg, Buttigieg. It's pronounced Buttigieg.
I read somewhere that South Bend is an economic disaster in an otherwise pretty healthful state.
South Bend has had good levels.
Lake County, is that?
So you're talking about to the northeast of Indiana. So South Bend had good levels of comeback. And these are areas in and near where they make a tremendous amount of the RVs of America. And because the economy has been doing so well, RV sales are through the roof. So he has some places that he can point to, but none of that matters. The fact that he's an openly gay mayor, the fact that he served in the military, none of those things will matter, because what will matter most is how progressive are your policies. And if he isn't willing to say Medicare for all, if he isn't willing to go down the road of free college tuition, if he isn't willing to go down all of these paths that Bernie Sanders has said are the paths that now this party does, he has no shot. So what does the rest of it even matter?
You're a guy about messaging, right? This is what you do
True.
every day, 6 hours a day, folks. I mean, again, it's incredible. So about the messaging, when you have somebody that comes up from the right and says, okay, Ocasio-Cortez, tell me how you're going to do this new Green Deal and the trillions that are raised, and you're not going to get the taxes from the top 5% of the population. It falls on deaf ears for a lot of people. How does that message survive in today's sound bit universe that we live in?
How does her message survive?
How does the right's message, how does capitalism and low taxes and low regulation survive? It's not a sexy message as opposed to free healthcare, free college, right?
Well, it's not, if you consider those things sexy. No, it's not as sexy. But the idea of you should keep what you earn, that's pretty damn sexy. That is bikini sexy right there. that you should be able to choose your own course and not have it chosen for you, that's pretty damn sexy right there. And a little bit of it has to do with age. And that's why college kids are so damn infuriating, because they're at an age where they are this idealistic impressionable. One of the things I believe in is changing how we do college, which, by the way, will combat this. We need to have kids going to trade schools, going to apprenticeships, learning skills, learning abilities, and then after they have some experience of life under their belts, decide what you want to do with your life. You're going to live. This is the new age. It's 2019. You're going to live to be 90. You don't have to jump into a career at 19 and a half. Spend some time learning some skills, making some money, getting out of mom's basement, being able to afford your own car and take a girl out on a date, for the love of the Lord, if that's still even allowed now, and then pick a school, pick a topic, pick something you want to do, and then go forward. And part of the beauty of that is that you will no longer see kids under the thumbs of professors who think that they can mold and warp and abuse into believing certain things in order to get passing grades. I already know how to make a living. I don't need you. I'll just go to another school. Screw off. And you create, I think, a better attitude. But you're not wrong. Well, our job is tougher, right? Our job is tougher because we have to refute a lie that makes us seem unkind. And I think that there's nothing more unkind than somebody in Washington, D.C. telling somebody in Dallas, Texas, how they should live their life. That's offensive.
You're talking about people emoting, right? The entire underpinning of the left's argument is how it feels. It feels hateful.
Right.
It feels marginalized, and labeling. And, you just said, take a girl out on your own dime. Well, how do you know it's a girl? You're labeling, you're misgendering now. It's beyond ridiculous. And this entire discussion has become something that I thought we would see a fight back against. I thought there would be a spring back against this, and we didn't really see this in the last election in 2018, did we? I was a little, obviously the Senate stayed red, but I was a little concerned regarding what we saw with 40-plus Congress people turning over from red to blue.
But there were also a fair amount of retirements, and people seem to like this idea of divided government, if you will. I don't think they're correct in that, but they seem to like it. I do think that there is a level of pushback to, okay, we get it. You're lecturing to us. We don't want to be lectured to anymore. The Golden Globe ratings were a disaster. I don't care if Kevin Hart hosts the Oscars or not. The ratings are going to be a disaster. We've turned finally and realized how gross Lena Dunham is. So there is a bit of, okay, we've heard enough. And there are suburban mothers all across the country who watched what happened to Brett Kavanaugh and said, you mean some girl could decide she doesn't like my son and call him a rapist and his life is over? Screw that.
But Tony, why did we stick with that message after the Kavanaugh hearings? Because we diverted to immigration, and a lot of people say that cost seats.
Can't answer that question for you. And I'm not 100% sure that it did cost seats. And if you've already lost 40, and if you'd only lost 35, what are we arguing about here? But I think you ask a good question in that why can't we stay focused on our message, and why would we allow others to move us from a valuable message? I think that's good, and it's always a good reminder, and conversations like this help to bring us back to some of those core things.
Finishing up here, obviously we're way, way, way far away from even the primaries themselves, but any expectations, what you see right now as far as what happens in 2020, Senate, House, President?
I'm the wrong guy to ask, because I'm not a guy convinced that Trump is running. I have never been convinced that Trump is running for a second term. I have no reason to buy it or believe it. What, because he said it? You want me to talk about all the things that are different between what he says and what he does? The deeds versus words conversation of Donald Trump? I'm not buying it at all. When it happens, then I'll know that it happens. So no, I do no prognosticating for 2020. All I know is for content, it is going to be a dream. And the other thing I know is that if you get yourself worked up by it, you're gonna have a heart attack quick.
Much appreciation, and folks, continue to find us at Ricochet, America's Voice News, and all of your favorite podcast applications of choice. And at YouTube, hit that subscribe button and follow us. Hit that notification bell. Again, a very special thanks to Tony Katz, WIBC. Listen to this guy, fantastic, hardest working guy in radio. Thanks so much. We'll be back again soon at Whiskey Politics.